So hi there, everybody. Welcome back. And um, I guess you all get to go back to some in-person classes this week, don't you, starting on Thursday? I want to talk to you all about that for a second before we jump into the material for class today. VCU was pretty straightforward when they emailed me and said, we're going back to original course modalities starting on Thursday the 4th. So by Thursday the 4th, you must go back to, if it's an online course, stay online. If you had it announced as a hybrid course, you're going to do hybrid. If it was an in-person class, you got to go in person. And that's the way they want it. So if you remember, we talked at the very beginning of the year, I had planned to, I hope, transition maybe back in a little more slowly, but especially seeing as the course is sort of an in-person hybrid anyway, I'm going to have to call you all back to an in-person class on Tuesday. Now, please know, everybody should know this. We will never have class on Thursday this semester, even unless an admin comes and tells me that needs to happen. But my plan for the class this whole semester was to have Tuesday classes and then the rest of it be asynchronous. So that's what we plan to do. So don't log in. Don't come for in-person meetings on Thursday. Don't come for online meetings on Thursday. We're going to be meeting in person on Tuesdays. Another thing that I'm going to have to email you all about, but I'll tell you right here, is that I made a mistake in my email to you a couple days ago. We're going to be at the Academic Learning Commons, not the Commons, not the Student Commons. That makes sense. I actually have never worked at the ALC before, so I actually didn't know that it was a thing. That was just a building that I used to walk past. So when I saw Academic Learning Commons, I just said the Commons, and I thought it was the same thing. Turned out it's not. Then I was embarrassed when I went to go find my classroom and found out that no such classroom exists at the Commons. So yeah, Academic Learning Commons. I don't know what it'll be like because I still don't have access to the building. I can't get in to see the classroom. So it'll be a surprise for all of us come next week when I have card access to the building. The room is, I believe, 2201. Is that what I said on my email? Yeah, let me double check that actually. I don't want to say yes without being right.
I just want to clarify, is this the MCalc right across from Harris Hall?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't find it right now, but I thought it was going to be easy. Can somebody confirm, check the email that I sent? Does it actually, you know what, I can find it on
You're correct.
I'm correct. Okay. Up on the announcements. I sent an announcement the other day. While we're on the subject, is there anybody here who doesn't get my announcements as emails? I type them in as an announcement in Canvas, and I think they go to everybody as an email. Actually, can I just get a show of hands? Raise your hand if you do get emails that are announcements from me from Canvas. Okay. Is there anybody who does not? Okay. So yeah, 2201 in the Academic Learning Commons. It's catty corner from the Commons, and it's across from Harris Hall. If you go to the financial aid office, you walk out of the financial aid office, and it's the building across the street from you there. I plan to, yeah, that's where we'll be. Several of you have had questions about transitioning in, and actually, I'm definitely willing to accommodate anybody who has a few bumps coming back to our hybrid class. If you have anything specific that you could use some assistance with or need me to change, reach out to me. I'm happy to say yes to that, and I'm happy to accommodate whatever you have going on. I will say that I can't accommodate to make the class online or for the rest of the semester for anybody. It's not an online course. When you signed up for it, you signed up for an in-person course. So I assume that's a thing that you had a plan to be able to make. So reach out to me if you need some accommodations for transitioning back to in-person, and I'm happy to accommodate up to a certain extent. So of course, when we're in person, they've I don't know. I haven't seen my classroom, but I think that they have large classrooms and will be appropriately spaced out, more than 6 feet between each person. We'll have our masks on. We'll have hand sanitizer in the class. And of course, I'll change any class activities that we have that include interaction to where it's interaction where there's 6 feet between each person. So that's how we'll be changing that. Vanessa asks, will attendance be mandatory? It's going to be the same attendance policy as we've had all year so far and is on the syllabus. It's just, instead of being an online thing, it's going to be an in-person thing. So, and what that is if you have 2 or fewer absences for the year, for the semester, then you get 5 extra credit points. And 5 extra credit is a pretty good bump, actually. And on top of that is just mandatory is a strong word for attendance. You know, I hope and expect that you all be there. The class is designed so that we have in-person contact. I'm sorry, not in-person contact. So we have so we're in the room together, so that we have interpersonal contact. As we're going to have discussions, we're going to have activities, so on and so forth. I plan the classes hoping and assuming that we're going to be there and going to be able to see your faces. So yes, in that respect, I do expect you to be there. On the other hand, the only formal penalty you get to for not coming is the extra credit. So that's all I'll say on that. Yeah, there will be no Thursday classes of any kind. As usual, we'll have the class on Tuesday. I'll teach you some stuff. I'll tell you the assignment, and I may still post a couple bits of the assignment before Thursday, though I'll try to get as many up as I can. All the work for this week is up there right now. Ooh, more questions? Yeah, Magdalene.
So when we go back to in-person, will our assignments still be submitted through Canvas, or are we going to do paper assignments?
Yeah, I'll still be doing Canvas, you know, partly just to limit the amount of touching and passing stuff back and forth that we have to do. I actually did find a file format that does not work for turning stuff in Canvas, and that is Apple's Pages. So Pages doesn't work in Canvas, doesn't work on my device. So if you've got an Apple device, please don't use Pages. Please probably transferring it to a Google Doc is probably your best bet on that one. Every other format works, including just taking a picture of it and uploading a JPEG. That's fine. And if you do multiple files, I can easily click through those as well. So except for Pages, everything has gone really well with you turning assignments in. Okay. Any more questions before we blast off? I need to take attendance with a screenshot. There we go. You have all been screenshotted. All right. So let's go briefly over some homework. On the minimum wage assignment, I thought that you all did a good job. I think that it appears that y'all are pretty good with logical writing. I'm sure that some of you have some practice with it with AP classes in high school and everything, but for the most part, you guys had a good logical structure to your essays, and so I was happy to read those. I think everybody except one person in our class said that there should be a $15 minimum wage. So it sounds like there's some unanimity on that. There was one person who said that states should determine their own minimum wages. So I was interested. Usually it's about 20% of the class or 25% has some reservations about a high minimum wage, but in this time it was unanimous, close to it. Maybe I just didn't give you the anti-minimum wage argument strong enough. I'll give it to you a little bit right now. What if the minimum wage in Richmond, Virginia was $200 an hour? Would that be a good thing? right? Not many of us would make $200 an hour because shops would just be like, man, I can't operate under these conditions. And they would move a little bit farther away to pay a lower wage there, or they would just close down and do their next best option. Remember that the opportunity cost is sometimes pretty close to the original choice. So they could do things that just didn't require minimum wage labor. So the main argument against minimum wage is that it causes unemployment and it drives up prices. And while that it might not be a very big deal here in Richmond, in places that are really poor, like in some places in like the deep South, the Delta of Mississippi, you can imagine places where there would be like no small businesses because they just wouldn't be able to afford paying anybody there. One other thing is that it's the illustration is that it knocks the bottom couple rungs out of the economic ladder so that the lowest people can't climb up on it. The people who would bear the cost of the increased minimum wage would be the people who are the very most vulnerable, the ones who just the first ones who nobody's going to give a job to. So that's one thing that kind of gives me a hitch sometimes. Sometimes I think, well, minimum wage increase would be good. There's a lot of working people who would be benefiting from it. But sometimes I do catch up sometimes. I'm like, but what about the very most vulnerable people who someone looks at and says, like, I just can't, I just can't pay you 15 because we're not making it back. Anyway, there's the pushback on the minimum wage. You all made very good arguments for the minimum wage increase, actually, and like it said on the documents that I gave you, there would, according to the CBO, there would be a decrease in poverty, as you have some people who are the working poor would be the working less poor, and some people's wages would double. Whew. Any other thoughts on that? Okay. Anyway, in general, I thought you all did pretty good writing assignments. We don't do a ton of them in econ class, but I always love, for the sake of the liberal arts and practicing writing, to give students an assignment on that. And I thought you all are on the right track. So moving on to comparative advantage assignment. I know it was a little hokey. I know that you had to watch cartoon people talking to each other. It's a little weird sometimes, but I hope that you learned the lesson. Let me ask you a couple things about comparative advantage.
I have a quick question on that real quickly.
Sure, go ahead.
With the pretest score is not going to be graded, right? It was just
no.
Okay. I got nervous for a second. Thank you.
Yeah, and bear in mind that it's and the post test, it really is just an assignment grade. It's not a really, I mean, it says it's out of 100%, but it's not 100 points. It's just an assignment. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this. Let's say I have a little example for you called Dr. Day versus LeBron James one-on-one. So y'all familiar with who LeBron James is? Famous basketball player. So let's say that LeBron James is a famous basketball player, but do you know that I, being from Indiana, am also a basketball player? Indiana is the most basketballing place in the whole world, I will have you know, and everybody learns jump shots and fundamentals coming from Indiana. So how would I do if I was on an NBA basketball team? Let's say my dad buys the Indiana Pacers. He says as a stipulation of buying it that I get subbed in and I get to play point guard for the Pacers. And actually, let me sort of, and let me pull up a whiteboard here so you all can see. So let's say that in 45 minutes of scoring baskets, how many do you think that I could score in a game of basketball in the NBA? Remember, I'm the point guard. I get the ball every time we go up the floor. How many points would I be able to score at the end of the game? Awkward silence. Wow. Somebody tell me a number.
5.
6.
You see, 5 points assumes that I would get inside the 3-point arc at some point. I don't think that's going to, Vern says 15. I think 6 points is a good number because I would just throw the ball up from 3-point land every time and miss most of the time. A couple times it would go in. So I think that, yeah, on this scale that we have here, actually, I'm going to draw a little graph there. I would score 6 points. LeBron James, how much is he averaging nowadays? I think he's averaged in the upper 20s most of his career. Does anybody know? I think that he's still good for something like 25 points a game. And all credit to LeBron James. When I was in graduate school, like 10 years ago, the example was still LeBron James. That's how long he's been dominant. Okay. Magdalene gives me a 50-50 chance of making it from like half court. Unlikely. Okay, so we can see that LeBron James has a clear advantage here. So let me ask you this. Well, actually, let me do the next one. So let's say that we're not scoring points. Let's say that another thing that we could possibly do is mowing lawns, right? I don't know if you all know this, but LeBron James is really good at mowing lawns. Did anybody know that? He's really fast. He's really big. He could probably push 2 mowers at the same time. He's in fact, in the time that it would take him to score 25 points, he could actually mow 4 lawns. Now, I'm not as good at mowing lawns, but like many people, I did mow lawns when I was coming up. So in that amount of time, I could probably only mow 2 lawns. Now, there's a trade-off here, of course. And so we have this, and we have this, showing that, let's say that LeBron chose to only play half a basketball game, then go home. Let's say he chose to play 3/4 of a basketball game. He could score 20 points and still have time for 1 lawn, right? I have the same trade-off. Let's say that I get frustrated at halftime and I go home. I could also mow about 1 lawn. That's about how good I am. Though yeah. So let me ask you a question. From the comparative advantage module that you all did, what is it called when LeBron James can do something better than I can? When he can do everything better than I can? What's the word for that, or the phrase for that?
Isn't it absolute advantage?
It is absolute advantage. LeBron James is absolutely better at scoring points than I am, but he's also absolutely better at mowing lawns than I am. You know, if we actually put on this graph like teaching economics classes, he would probably be better at that too. LeBron James is just a superior human being compared to me when it comes to producing things. So here's the question. Does LeBron need me for anything? Is there any way that we could trade or work together such that I could benefit him at all, or he could benefit me? We have a couple no's and a couple yeses. Ooh, that's interesting. Why the difference in opinion? Does anybody, can anybody tell me what's the part of the modules we did on comparative advantage where they go over this, where they take up this question? Are there any parts where there's a person who's particularly good at something and somebody who's not really good?
I can't remember the specifics, but wasn't it like mowing lawn? Or no, it was like the car business or something. Like the superhero could do it faster.
Yeah. Fixing cars, shoveling snow. So yeah, so they take up the same issue here in the assignment that we did. And what they find out is that when you have 2 people who are who are trying to work together, but one of them is better at everything than the other person, the person who's not as good always has not an absolute advantage, but a comparative advantage at something, and that they have a lower opportunity cost of doing it. They have a lower opportunity cost. So let's look at it like this. Oops, sharing my screen again. Okay, so off to the side here, we have LeBron. What in the world? Oh my goodness. We have LeBron and we have Day. LeBron is able to score. He's got points and he's got lawns. He can do 25 points. That's horrible. He can do 25 points. He can do 4 lawns. And down here, Day can do either 6 points or he can do 2 lawns. Okay, so the question is, what does LeBron give up when he decides to mow lawns?
The 25 points, right?
Yeah, well, okay, so yeah. If he decides to mow 4 lawns, he gives up 25 points. If he decides to score 25 points, he gives up 4 lawns. And then what you can do to find the opportunity cost is what you do is you just divide that. So just pulling out my handy little calculator here, 4 divided by 25. So every time that he every time that he mows a lawn, he gives up 6.25 points. On the other hand, every time that I mow a lawn, I only give up 3 points, So when I mow a lawn, my cost is low. I don't give up many points when I mow lawns. When LeBron James mows a lawn, he gives up a lot of points. So what this is called when I have a lower opportunity cost in this case, mowing lawns, this is called my comparative advantage. And one thing that you'll find fascinating, my students, and here's an axiom that I want you all to remember. When 2 people trade, or when 2 groups trade, both of them have a comparative advantage. Nobody ever doesn't have a comparative advantage. In every single situation, every person has some comparative advantage. They have something that they can do at a lower opportunity cost. And that's just built into the math. And I know it sort of might seem a little strange or uninteresting when you're looking at it like this, but the mere fact that we can take any 2 people in the world and come up and say that both of them have an opportunity cost in one thing they're trying to do together shows that there's nobody who ever can't do a certain job, and there's nobody who ever can't trade. Dr. Day and LeBron can trade. And in fact, you can probably get this by intuition. LeBron would specialize in mowing lawns, and I said that wrong, didn't I? LeBron would specialize in scoring points. Dr. Day would specialize in mowing lawns. And the reason that I've chosen this illustration is because it's obvious, right? When I asked the question at the very beginning is, does he need me for anything? Several of you said no, probably not. But in real life, does LeBron mow his own lawn? No, he does not, right? The only things that are really worth LeBron's time are scoring points, for which he earns a ton of money, doing promotions, from which he earns even more money, and he also does a lot of charitable work, actually. In fact, if you are a student in the School of Education at the University of Akron, you go to the LeBron James School of Education at the University of Akron. So he lends his name to a lot of charitable work, to his credit. But LeBron doesn't mow his lawn. You know, he's probably good at a lot of things, but they're not worth his time. And if you want to know the principle of comparative advantage boiled down to one phrase, it means you have a comparative advantage when the work you do is just not worth somebody else's time. You know, there are probably people out there who are better at teaching economics than I am, but they're just so good at other stuff that doing this isn't worth their time. They're out there like running the world, and it's just left to little old me to teach the econ, because this is what I can do at the lowest opportunity cost. Sometimes it, have you ever, do you know of any real life examples where somebody does the job, where there's somebody else that they know is better at doing the job, but you do it because the other person doesn't have time to do it? I can give you one other example, and I maybe see if you guys can come up with any real life ones. But if you've ever been on a sports team or coached a sports team, I coached high school soccer before. And sometimes you have a player that is just a really good soccer player. And you wish that person, if that person is playing fullback, they're going to be the best fullback on the pitch. If they play center midfield, they're going to be the best center midfielder on the pitch. If they play goalie, they're going to be the best goalie. If they play striker, they're going to be the best striker. And so, but you still have to put that person in some position. Usually winds up being center midfield, attacking center midfield, to tell you the truth. You try to put the person you try to get the most out of the person who is best on the field, but then it's not like the other people on the field, it's not like they're off the field just because somebody else there is better. Everybody has a role, everybody has a part, and you try to put the other people where they're most valued, even though they're not best. I really see comparative advantage when I'm positioning my people on the soccer pitch. Do you have any examples that you've seen of where somebody is maybe really good at something, but they just don't have time to do it, and so they leave it for somebody else? Help me out here, students. I'd love to hear an example, maybe one from work. Magdalene says, every group project I've ever done. Actually, yeah. Which person are you in the group, Magdalene? Are you the one who does everything?
I mean, not necessarily, but sometimes yes, sometimes no. But there's been a few group projects where like one person is really good at making PowerPoints, but they don't have time to do that. So they do the written part instead. And it's like, there's kind of a comparative advantage there because I'm not as good, but they don't have time. So we have to like trade jobs and everybody loses a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great example, actually. If there's somebody who's a really good writer, even if they're best at making the PowerPoints, they should stick to writing and make sure the written part is really good and let the other people make the PowerPoints, which might take them longer. It might not be quite as good, but doesn't matter quite as much. I remember I did a group project as an undergrad, actually a partner project, where I had such a high-powered partner. I remember this girl said, just go to the library and get me the book and bring it to me. I'll do the rest. I don't want you meddling in my project. And so I was like, all right. So that's what I did. And that's what she wanted. And yeah, she could not be bothered to go across campus and get the book while she was hard at work on the project. Yeah. Any other examples? That was a good one. Well, okay, I'll give you another example from work because I want to hear one from work. I'm fascinated with people's work. If anybody's ever worked at fast food, I worked at Taco Bell and Pizza Hut and Fazoli's Real Italian, Real Fast at different parts in my high school and undergraduate career. And the manager was always the best person at the restaurant in doing any of these jobs. She was best at the register. She was best at doing the books. She was best at preparing the food. She was best at all the stuff. But she couldn't be bothered to be on the register all the time or cooking the food all the time, right? She was the only one who could oversee the whole thing and make sure that everything was clicking like this. That's why she was the manager. And so even though she had an absolute advantage in everything there in the store, she only did the main management functions. Actually, she did jump in the normal stuff pretty routinely, but you get the point. I want to hear one more example from y'all before we go on. Which person were you at Bojangles, Vern?
I'm a shift manager, but it took me like a while to get to that point. But when I first began, like, I was good at basically almost everything because I was a manager. I had to focus on everyone doing their job and then counting inventory and then the money and all of that. So I didn't have time to, make sure, everything up front was doing good, or if, someone on chicken was dropping it right and everything like that.
Yeah. Look, Vern's Logan's the same thing with sales. What is that work that you do again, Logan? Did you work at the gym?
Yeah, so I handle all the new memberships, cancellations, everything behind sales, basically.
I'm guessing sales is probably the main skill that you all need at the gym, right?
Yeah, we have to reach certain goals.
Yeah,
every month.
In sales, generally, people who are any good at sales really specialize in that, and other people are support roles. Yeah, I was pretty lousy at doing the register at fast food restaurants. In fact, the manager was way better than I was, but that's where I got stuck because I was bad at everything else too. By the way, Vern, I've noticed that Bojangles, I see a wide disparity in the quality and speed of Bojangles, I think, based on their staff. Have you ever noticed that?
Get it to a little table.
Yeah, it's weird. Some Bojangles I go to are so fast and some of them are so slow. And I can always predict why, and I know which store it is are the fast ones and which one are the slow ones. Why is that?
It honestly depends, of course, the workers, but also like the manager in charge. Like if it's just a manager that, just want gets in and out as fast as possible, like the whole team is like that. So they're slower and they're a little bit sloppy, but if I work, I'm more focused on customers and making sure like, every order is correct. It doesn't matter how long it takes. And usually my shifts go pretty well, even if I'm not in charge, like just because I like work pretty efficiently, it like sputs around. So it just depends on the staff, honestly.
Okay, thank you. So just to wrap this up then, note, LeBron has an absolute advantage in everything. Dr. Day has a comparative advantage in lawns because he can mow them at a lower opportunity cost. So, did you all just see my pop-up? Okay, good. No. I had a reminder to go buy groceries on the way home. So when you see this on the quiz, bear in mind that a lot of the time you can kind of, the main thing to not get tricked by is to say that one person doesn't need the other person for trade. Everybody always has a contribution and everybody can always contribute based on what they have a lower opportunity cost in. Sometimes you can just eyeball it and it's obvious, like this example with the points. But sometimes you actually kind of have to do the math, like what they do on the video inside the module, the Econ Lowdown module, which is what you do is you divide points by lawns for LeBron. And then you also for LeBron, you divide lawns by points. And then for Dr. Day, you divide lawns by points and then points by lawns. You got to do 4 division problems. And then all it is you just pick which number is lower for each person. And both people will both have a lower number. Incidentally, this is why economists like free trade between nations. And this is why economists don't want don't like tariffs or quotas or things that stop nations from trading freely together, because what the economist does is looks at this production possibility frontier problem with comparative advantage and says, you want to let both countries produce as much as they possibly can and then trade. That's how we can all be wealthier. And really, no country makes another country poorer by producing and trading. You never can look at another country and say, because they're wealthy, my country is poor. In real life, by using the principle of comparative advantage, you want to let each country produce as much as they can, specialize in what they're best at, and actually what they have a lower opportunity cost in. And then when you have free trade between nations, both countries can prosper. That's really the core application of comparative advantage, even though we talk a lot about lawns and points and stuff like that. It has a real international outcome. Okay, any questions about that before we move on?
So it's always the one with the lesser value that would have the comparative advantage, right? With the lower opportunity cost.
Always the one with a lower opportunity cost. All you do is divide each of the things you can produce by the other number. Do that for each person. And in every single case, one of the people will have a lower number in one of the two things.
Okay, so LeBron would have had the lower opportunity cost in the points. Okay.
Yeah. And I'll have a lower opportunity cost in lawns.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to how we coordinate all this stuff. I'm about to introduce you to an elementary economics concept, which is productive resources. And then we're going to look how we coordinate the use of productive resources, which will lead us into markets. All right. So if you go over here to resources that make my product, and this is a clever little economics lesson for grades grades 2 through 5. You might want to save this, by the way, if you're collecting lesson plans over the course of your college career, because that's a wise thing to do. Once you actually hit student teaching, it's good to have some lesson plans ready. So do I have the resources to make my product? With this assignment, you assume that the students are doing, actually you don't assume, you actually do a classroom mini economy where the students have to make a product and then sell it inside their classroom for play money. Some of you might have done that in elementary school already. So let's pretend that we are doing a classroom economy and we are making paper mache masks. We're making paper mache masks. That's the thing that kids often like to make. Now, in all of economics, there are 3, sometimes 4 productive resources. A productive resource is something that you need to make a good or service. And by the way, a good is something tangible you can touch that fulfills a want. A service is something that you do for somebody else that fulfills a want. And we need natural, human, and capital resources in order to fulfill these wants. So a natural resource is this. And actually, this is kind of an elementary concept, so I'm going through this fast, but I do want you to know this. So you're going to want to take notes probably on what I just say, all right? In fact, I'll just say it again as we go. So we have economic wants. We've already done that. Goods are tangible things that satisfy an economic want. Services are things that we do for each other that satisfies an economic want. Okay, so we need productive resources. So productive resources are what goes into making a good or service. So there are three kinds of productive resources. There are natural resources. These are gifts of nature. There's human resources. This is human work and human capital. Human capital is a person's skills, habits, and education. There's kind of a lot there under human resources. When you just put your hands to the keyboard or use your arms to make something, that's your labor, that's your human resources. But the part that we really get paid for nowadays is your human capital. Human capital is what you're building up at VCU. You're building skills, you're building habits, you're building education, these things that you bring to the table. Another way to say it is from here down is your labor. You get paid minimum wage for that. From here up is your human capital. You get paid, that's where you get paid the rest. So human capital is the crucial part. The last kind of resources, somewhat confusingly, are capital resources. Capital resources are goods that help produce goods and services. Another way to say it is they are tools. Another way to say it is, I always like this with my students, capital resources. Get it? Capital resources. Capital resources can be reused. Oh my goodness, I lost them. So capital resources are resources that you can reuse. A computer, a building, a hammer, the sidewalk. These are all different tools we can use to make stuff. Now, there's a couple other things to keep in mind. There's also, I'm going to do a star here. Entrepreneurship. It's sometimes called a productive resource. I don't think it quite is. Entrepreneurship is what organizes other resources. That's what an entrepreneur does. An entrepreneur, we think of an entrepreneur as somebody who takes the risk to start a business, but really the service they're providing for the economy is they're deciding where the other productive resources go. It's a pretty big deal. The other star asterisk that we're going to do is intermediate goods are goods that are used up in production. Right? So a lot of the time when you're working with your students with productive resources, natural, human, and capital resources, a lot of what you're going to see are intermediate goods. So if you're making paper mache masks, the glue is going to be an intermediate good. The paper is going to be an intermediate good, right? So when you're asking your students what goes into making the paper mache masks, they might have to think back through those intermediate goods to actually find, say, the natural resources. Okay. So let's go see what goes into making our paper mache masks. Oops. Okay. So students, tell me, what are some natural resources that we need for making a paper mache mask in class?
Wood, paper.
Wood for paper. Yep, we would write that right down in there. Thanks, Amoni. Let's go to Vanessa. What's another natural resource that we might use for making paper mache masks?
I honestly don't know, like, what do you use to make them? Like, I don't know what goes into it.
Well, we've given the example of paper and glue so far. So what's something that goes into paper or glue? Amoni said trees to make the paper. That'd be one of them. What else might go into making paper or glue? I think those are the only two ingredients that I know for paper mache.
Yeah, like water goes into glue, and like, I don't know, like the
No, that's perfect. Yeah, water. Just stay right there. Yeah, water. Vern put that too. Water, paper. Somebody else call these out right here, because honestly, I don't know a lot about paper mache either. Maybe paint is in there. Paint's an intermediate good? What goes into making paint?
Water and pigment.
Okay.
You can usually find pigment like that's plant-based. So like most pigments come from, well, not now, but pigment used to come from like plants and herbs and stuff. Okay. So I don't know.
All right. I thought pigment was like, it was a science term. Okay. So natural resources is always a little harder than you might think. But students appreciate natural resources because it's something really tangible that they can think about. What sort of human resources go into making the pigment, bringing us the water, making the paper? What sort of human resources would go into making a paper mache mask?
Just the act to create the paper mask, just the human doing it.
Okay, yeah. So when the student, right? So when the students are just putting the mask together, their labor is doing it. Yeah, their hands.
Maybe like art class, like education.
Yeah, so that would be part of their human capital, wouldn't it? Right.
Oh.
So so you're right, because remember, human capital is a part of human resources. So yeah, they had to learn how to make those paper mache masks, and so it's part of their learning from art class is going to go into that as well. Very good. Bear in mind, you can also go way down the chain as well and say that, somebody had to provide them the paper in the first place. So you could put like the Dunder Mifflin Paper Company. You need paper salesmen and people to man the warehouse and load the trucks and everything like that. And then you can go into, if you want to really make the whole history of the mask and everybody that goes into it, you have to do the whole paper company and then the whole potable water company as well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What capital resources? These are a little bit more proximate, actually. What are some capital resources you might need for putting the mask together? What's a tool that you might reuse?
You would need a paintbrush to apply the glue.
Oh yeah, paintbrush, definitely a reusable tool. Absolutely.
Would it be scissors to cut the paper?
Scissors, yep. Now notice, of course, the glue, the paint, the paper, these would all be intermediate goods. And in most economics classes, they don't emphasize it that much, but we're emphasizing it here again because most of what your students see are going to be intermediate goods. And I used to not teach this concept. Actually, I used to say, like students don't need to know the word intermediate and everything. But every time that teachers actually try to do some real life work with students on natural, human, and capital resources, they find themselves working with intermediate goods constantly. So you need to at least be ready to discuss that concept. If you want to use a different word for it, like in between goods, that's okay. That's fine. Just you should know the concept. Okay. So here's the thing. Who decides what all the stuff in our economy is used for? We've got paper, we've got water, we've got scissors, we've got paintbrushes, we've got glue. how in the world did that find all that stuff into the hands of the kids? How can the kid be confident when she goes to the store to buy materials that those materials that she needs are going to be there on the shelf for her for that project? Because, we've just been talking about how big of an operation this is. You've got to have the paper company, you've got to have the water company, you've got to have the scissor company, the paintbrush company, and all these need support as well. And it goes down into this big, huge chain to make sure that when this girl walks into Target, there's paper right there on the shelf for her. Do we really appreciate how complicated that is? Who's planning all this?
Is it based off like the demand of inventory? It all depends.
It is, Logan. And that's what we're going to, it's not just the demand, but also the supply. And we're going to be digging into that the next couple of days. And so I'm going to show you a video right now that I hope kind of helps you get a bit of appreciation for how vast and complex an operation that we're talking about here. So I'm going to share this and we'll watch this video. Y'all, I love this video. If any econ video ever brings a little bit of a tear to my eye sometimes, it's this one, even though it's not supposed to, but. Okay, I Pencil the movie. Magdalene, Kara, Ashley, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear that?
This is the world we live in. If we weren't surrounded by it every day, if we didn't take it for granted, we'd be dumbstruck by its very intricacy and brilliance. This is an ordinary, familiar wooden pencil. You might think a pencil is simple. Chances are you've been using one since before you could even read or write. But just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's simple. In fact, it's complicated, elaborate, beautiful, elegant. Its very existence is too improbable for any one person to truly comprehend. These are the basic materials that go into a pencil: graphite, cedar, metal, and rubber. But if you had all the elements of a pencil right in front of you, could you make a pencil? It's not as easy as you might think. In fact, no single person on the face of the earth could do it without the help of countless others. And this is the key to understanding the world. A pencil, just like you and me, is the end result of a vast and intricate family tree, a symphony of human activity that spans the globe. Through their work and knowledge, a vast number of people have had a hand in making this simple pencil. Unlike your family tree, this one begins with an actual tree. The most immediate ancestor of the pencil is a cedar tree in the Pacific Northwest. But the loggers who harvest the timber are also its ancestors. And these men don't work alone. They, in turn, are assisted by the people and industries that produce the saws, rope, and countless other tools that they use. These are also the ancestors of our pencil. As is the waitress at a nearby diner who sells the loggers lunch, to say nothing of the thousands of people involved in producing that simple midday meal. Across time and space, the web grows. Consider the roads, trucks, ships, communication systems, and the people who design, build, and maintain them. All of them are necessary to bring the lumber to the mills and the slat factories that process them. All of them are also the ancestors of the pencil. And even with the work of all these people, so far all we have is a stained wooden slat, a naked half of a wooden body of a pencil. But its family tree is larger and more extensive. The graphite is mined in China and Sri Lanka. At the pencil factory, it's mixed with clay and heat and other materials before it's extruded, dried, and baked in a kiln. People from different continents Different cultures cooperate to bring these materials together with waxes and kilns and equipment from across the world. These too are the ancestors of the pencil. And the same is true of the eraser. With ingredients from around the world, it's the end result of a similarly complex and exotic branch of the family tree. As is the farouk, the metal band made from material that is mined, refined, and shipped from all over the world. Each part of the pencil is the result of the collaboration and cooperation of millions of people. Together, they form a process that is constantly changing and adapting. A change in the availability or cost of material from one place might make another source more desirable, and the process changes and adapts fluidly. And there is a fact that's still more astounding. The absence of a mastermind, of anyone dictating these countless actions which bring a pencil into being. Each member of this family tree supplies only a small amount of the necessary know-how needed to make a pencil. They do so voluntarily, not because they necessarily want pencils or like pencils, but because by working to create them, they exchange their labor and skills for the wages that let them buy what they want and need. What you're seeing is the market at work, the spontaneous configuration of creative human energies, of millions of people with their various skills and talents, organizing voluntarily in response to human necessity and desire, as if led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of the intention. Every second we are alive, we benefit from the products of voluntary, spontaneous cooperation. This is the modern world. It's miraculous, it's intricate, and it gets better every day, so long as people are free to interact with each other. If we can leave the creative energies of humankind uninhibited, there's no limit to what we can accomplish.
Did you see the mom was serving food to the guys that end up being a part of making the pencil? And then the pencil is what her daughter used to learn how to become an architect. I think it's so sweet. But notice, no single person knows how to make a pencil. There's not a single person alive that could just make that like this. Also, there's nobody who's a mastermind. There's nobody controlling the whole thing. And the millions of people who are involved in making the pencil don't know each other, don't really never know that they're cooperating with each other. They might not even like each other. And yet this miracle happens. And so this is the miracle of the market, of the invisible hand. And it's what we're going to we're going to study the next couple of days. So you have another Econ Lowdown lesson. It's going to be shorter than the one you just did. You need to do lessons 1 and 2, supply and demand. Do not do lesson 3, market equilibrium. We're going to do that next time. If you did it this time, it would be too much work. So you're going to do a pretest, lesson 1, lesson 2. That should take you, I think, about an hour and a half to do. And then you also need to do a little reading quiz on iPencil, which you can either just watch you can look at the video we just watched. You can also read the essay that I've attached as well. It's open notes, so you're allowed to look at the quiz while you take it. Okay? I'll stick around a second for questions, but other than that, you'll have a wonderful week. Okay?
I had a quick question.
Sure.
I don't know if it's just my Canvas, but your very first assignment, it still says it's not graded and it's late. I don't know if you've gotten to that yet, but I just wanted to make sure because everything else is up to date in my grade book.
Okay. I have a couple things I haven't graded. That might be one of them.
Okay. Yeah, it was just the first one. That's why I was wondering if it was just mine or.
I don't know if you've done it already, but if please do make a note on that assignment to say it wasn't late, or just, and you can go make notes on the assignment so I can reply.
Okay, perfect. I'll do that just because it was the first one where it was like the first class and you had to like do the day the class started or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you all see on your end with those quotes? You don't get an email, do you, when I write a comment, or do you?
I think we do.
Okay.
And then at least I get an email like when it's graded. It's like, this has been added to gradebook, and then your instructor added a comment.
Yeah, so we'll know when you add a comment.
You
I don't get an
also know
email.
when
I get a notification from Canvas, but
Yeah.
So it's not like Blackboard. Blackboard would automatically give you notifications. Canvas, you have to sign up from the student end to receive notifications for certain things. So it's not something that you do, it's something that we have to do.
you must all really know when your professors have sat down to grade.
Yes.
Get all these notifications and emails. It's kind of embarrassing to be like, oh, Dr. Day, up pretty late tonight, aren't you? Dr. Day, grading right before class, huh? Yeah, okay.
I mean,
I also had a question.
Yeah.
There was a thing on there that said K-3 quiz, no due date or anything. Do we need to take that?
That was the reading quiz for the SOLs.
Crap. So is that a yes? I should have taken that.
Yeah, you're supposed to do that. Yeah.
Get right on that.
Yep, get right on it. It says quiz, but it's not a quiz. It's a little assignment, little reading quiz.
Okay, awesome.